Welcome back to ECW 2006, and this is of course the last time I'll be saying that, as when we advance one more day in game it will be a new year and we'll begin 2007. The idea between this video and these episodes of CyberSlam is that the last two shows of the year will be two 1 hour best of 2006 compilations. The reason I've done this is that in TEW there are only 48 weeks in a year, but I've been trying to follow a real world calendar since I started the save, and as a result these two episodes, which as far as the game's concerned obviously don't exist, will serve as the 23rd and 30th of December installments of CyberSlam and allow me to start 2007 on the right timeline of where I want to go throughout the next year. As far as this video is concerned, I'm going to use the time to reflect on the 11 months that I've booked, 43 episodes of CyberSlam and 2 pay-per-views, and to give a look behind the curtain at how the roster is shaped up in terms of pushes and whatnot, and recap what have been the best rated matches and shows of ECW's revival thus far. Before I go into that though, we see a major news story. TNA looking at John Cena putting together a lucrative offer. I'm at war with TNA. We're both at Cult, very similar levels. Basically, we really can't afford Cena to end up in TNA because that would pretty much spell the end of that war with TNA killing. And there we see on screen, he is not being considered seriously, so that is definitely a relief as we go into now a graph on screen of CyberSlam attendances throughout the year. I use venues for 3 or 4 weeks in a row, and I've got probably 4 or 5 venues on a loop, so there's not a huge amount of growth there, and that's not really a concern because when we see the viewership since the show debuted on ECW.com, there is a huge rise month by month from episode 1 to episode 43. We have pretty much quadrupled the amount of viewers, so that is definitely a great sign of growth and plays into an announcement that I've got for later in the video. Finally, we see the show ratings that we've gone through in 11 months, and what that tells me is that we lack consistency. I did hope that there'd be another line going straight up, but realistically I knew that wasn't going to happen because we can still have shows that fall into D pluses and C minus. Hopefully in 2007 I can really find a better level of consistency, and I think that will be helped by a change in the way that shows will be booked, again relating to that thing that I will confirm later in the video. In looking back at the first year of the series, I've noticed that early on, some of the shows that we booked, there was just some like major duds in there. I think it's episode 8, Tommy Dreamer versus Sonny Siaki in the main event. I look back at that, at the year they've had, and think, what was I thinking booking that as a main event? A 35 rating. I'd be disappointed if that was a rating for the opening match. Look there, Stevie Richards v CJ Sensation, who's a jobber who I've used maybe 2 or 3 times, getting a better rating than the main event. I know now how bad Sonny Siaki is. I didn't know that then, so I can be let off for that. But again, we had Steve Corino and Stevie Richards going one-on-one before they were aligned. Just some really random matches without much reason. So I am quite glad that, looking back now, more recent main events, Fertig v Punk, Xavier Homicide, Rhino LaParca, CM Punk, Stevie Richards, they all at least had a bit of a storyline reason behind them. So we've definitely got better in putting the shows together with more cohesive, reasonably put together matches, that kind of thing. That brings me on to the better shows, not looking at the negatives, but rather the positives. The best shows that we've done: an episode of CyberSlam in June, November to Remember in 2nd, Heatwave in 4th, beaten out by another episode of CyberSlam. Of course, we do have those 2 pay-per-view events, which you would hope would be the best shows we've done. Technically, though, only one of them was a pay-per-view because Heatwave aired on ECW.com, a 0.31. I don't know if that's good, don't know if that's bad, so I'm not too interested in the pay-per-view buy rates. But in terms of attendances, those 2 pay-per-view style shows getting the best rating. The rest, there's not really much you can take from that. But going into the best matches of the year, there's a very clear pattern. If you want to get in the top 10 matches, probably the best thing to do, wrestle CM Punk, or alternatively be CM Punk. One thing I've noticed is that the top 3 matches all include outsiders who aren't signed to the company now. That might be a bad thing in some respects, but I like the idea of bringing people in, bringing in world stars and letting them face off against our stars. The top rated New Breed v New Breed match gives me a lot of hope for the future. However, that ladder match, I remember that being like a breakthrough moment when I thought these 2 guys can be stars in the company, so I'm definitely happy to see that high up. Xavier being in 6th place against CM Punk, again another thing. He's been a little bit of a project of mine, and I am hoping to get a good push for Xavier in 2007, so that match there is proof that he is capable of doing good things, even if he isn't the most consistent member of the roster. I do expect to see a lot of change in the roster in 2007. We will be going in a different direction with the company, but as far as the full-time members of the roster who were here from the start, only Sabu has left the company. Of course, he committed the unforgivable act of no-showing a pay-per-view that he was main eventing. He was in an ECW world title match, and because he was a little bit unhappy, he just didn't bother showing up. Unforgivable. He will not be back in ECW anytime soon. The other people who've left were either on one-time or short-term deals, and just those elapsed. I would have loved to have kept LA Parker and Masato Tanaka, even if just on part-time deals, but it wasn't to be, as they left because they are freelancers. There's a lot more going on in workers signed, a lot of them again just local talents that we've signed on one-off deals, but Little Guido was somebody who I hadn't signed at first, but quite soon into the game I decided he would have had a good place on the roster. It's taken me about 10 months to actually position him well. He's been basically in a jobber tag team with the FBI, but now Chuck Palumbo's debuted and he will be doing much better. Ricky Reyes and Rocky Romero have been the backbone of the tag team division. Two really good signings, two people I was very happy to bring on board, and I think great additions to the Hustle, which if we'd have kept it as Xavier, Siaki, Homicide and Loki would have definitely floundered. Paul Burchill and Rhino, two of the other major signings, they have been great members of the roster, fitted into that upper mid-card main event role that we've given them absolutely perfectly. Raven has been a bit of a flop, I have to say. I'm not 100% sure what to do with him, and it is a bit concerning because his ratings are not where I'd hoped it'd be. I felt he could come in and just be an excellent promo guy, put on decent matches, but whether it's ratings in this mod or just an accurate representation of where he was in 2006, he really isn't where we need him to be. So to look at our roster currently as it stands, it's not something I often do. I don't look at pushes or things like that, as I plan most of the shows without the game open in front of me. But the first name you see on the roster is Al Snow, somebody we've not seen for quite some time. He wasn't prominent when he was here, but he went off to film a movie, which means as he's come back in the last couple of weeks, he has 83 overness all over the world. He's one of the biggest wrestling stars in the entire world, a crossover superstar. I'd love to see what Mick Foley had to say about that if it happened, but it's come completely out of the blue, and I don't really know what to do because he's the biggest star in the company, but it's Al Snow, so it feels a little bit weird. Anyway, so he's a road agent actually in this, but he can still wrestle, and I would be using him as a wrestler if he was to come back in any prominent position. We look at the main event there, we see CM Punk and Rhino as the two people who I'd say solid, definite main eventers. Paul Burchill, I'm happy to see up there, but realistically, I don't think he's done enough to be considered a main eventer in ECW. Of course, in-game, it's all based off their overness, and he's been in WWE, got that exposure, so I understand why. Personal security and personal security too. Again, that's just the Basham brothers under a hood. They've got that overness from WWE, but for all intents and purposes, we could have brought absolutely anybody in. The Sandman, who recently returned from a stint in rehab, he's been a complete disappointment for us, but basically because I've not used him, he's kept his overness, it seems like. Tommy Dreamer was a main eventer originally, so I think it's just that my booking makes people go down the roster, and Sandman, I've not had enough to be able to do that with. I'd rather see some more new breed members on there, but the Sandman's a main eventer apparently. Into the upper mid card, it shows the disconnect between how I push people and how they're positioned in the game. My perception, for instance, Guido and Palumbo, not really been pushed greatly. Palumbo's just come in and he will be there eventually. Guido, again, I'd hope will be a key player eventually, but from how they've been positioned throughout the year, it's not really where they should be. Raven, Carino, Richards, Dreamer, happy to see that there. Happy to see Homicide actually in the upper mid card. I thought he'd be lower, but again, low key is somebody I've tried to push and he's still just in the mid card. That mid card looks like a who's who really. It's a lot of independent guys from the time, and Elijah Burke's in there as well, but that's, I'd say, quite fair to be our mid card there. I'd like to see Loki a bit higher up. Of course, we had that push of Brent Albright that absolutely failed. He's now happily settled more into a tag team now, so I think he's in a better position than he was. Trent Acid, another name there, who was in rehab and has recently returned but not yet on screen. Our lower mid-carders, Balls Mahoney, CW Anderson, Danny Doring, Kevin Furtick and Xavier. Xavier is really somebody who I'd hope would reach the next level. Still a lower mid-carder on the recommended pushes. I don't think I've done the auto push for a little while, so it might not be exactly where people are, but we see Chris Cage, Ray Gordy and Roadkill as our openers, and I don't know if we have any enhancement talent. Just Tony Mamaluke, who actually picked up a win over Little Guido, which people weren't very happy with in general, but Mamaluke there are only enhancement talent, despite the fact that he is in the storyline and he's not really been used as a full-on jobber. I say that, I'll now look at his match record and see 3 wins, 10 losses. Yeah, he's pretty much an enhancement talent. A glorified enhancement talent, we shall say. We also have, if you'd believe it, despite the fact we've probably only had 2 or 3 matches with women in a women's division, it's very small of course, and they're all women who have been used as valets. Alison Danger very recently debuting with the company. There's also the out of ring pushes, which is just our staff and crew members. Shane McMahon, of course, the owner technically of ECW, and I have toyed with the idea of bringing him on screen in some capacity, with the hints that Paul Heyman isn't the ultimate power in ECW, but a McMahon on ECW programming, it just doesn't feel right to me. Definitely not at the moment. I've no doubt he'd be the most over heel in the company, to be fair, and once he did one of his crazy stunts, I'm sure he'd proved that he belonged, but it's just something that I'm not 100% sure about. It's good to have in the back pocket, and it might go somewhere sometime in the future, but right now, I don't expect to see him on screen within the company. As for the company's titles, Ricky Reyes and Rocky Romero are the only recognised champions that we knew. They beat the former champions who lost the title in April 2001. They were in that match against the Havana Pitbulls in that first title match back in July. CM Punk became the first TV champion, winning it in that great match with Homicide, but he did lose it to Rhino at November to Remember. The World Championship, of course, originally won by Rob Van Dam as the last man who remained undefeated in ECW, Kevin Furtig not on the roster at that time. CM Punk won it at November to Remember. When I just had to throw something together, he got injured 24 hours before the pay-per-view. Sabu no-showed the event, as I've mentioned, and I'm still pretty annoyed about that. I'll never forgive Sabu, basically. But CM Punk is a great worker. He does absolutely brilliant for us, and he's perfect to be in that world title scene. He was going to win the title about February or March, I think, in 2007 during the initial planning stage. Things changed, of course, as they so often do, and we had to put the title on him. But again, I'm very interested with where the world title and television championship scenes are going over the next few months. RVD, of course, will be back very, very soon. 6 days. I am probably going to hold off his return because, again, I'm going to keep going on about it. We have that announcement to make. The next step of this series, of course, TEW 2020 is looming, but I do want to work way around that because I'm not ready to end this save. I do think there's a long way to go as far as the story that I'm trying to tell is going, and we're almost 1 year to the day, or we will be in the next month or so, to when ECW returned on ECW.com, and on that date, Extreme Championship Wrestling will return to television as we will work on a deal to be aired on FX. I've seen in game that they are willing to discuss terms with us, which is very, very good to see. And I've tested what sort of deal we could get. A late evening slot for 1 year on FX would be absolutely brilliant for ECW, a sign of how far we've come since the company returned in February 2006, directly after our next pay-per-view, Guilty as Charged 2007, which is week 4 of January, and 6 years on from when the same event signalled the last ever pay-per-view of the original ECW. Things are only going to get bigger, things are only going to get better on our new show. A successful year 1 of the reboot, with the company's return to TV as the ultimate reward for that. We expect to see new faces and old faces, but perhaps more importantly, a better, stronger roster than ever before as we take the next step. Extreme Championship Wrestling in 2006. New Breed Unleashed is in the bag. Now, ECW 2007, we begin that build to Guilty as Charged in the next episode of CyberSlam. A huge match for Guilty as Charged will be announced on that show. And we begin 2007 with the game wishing us a happy new year, but I don't think we're going to be getting any awards. We're not even the most improved company of the year, which is pretty disappointing there. A look, we do probably have a few people I'd expect in the Power 500. Yes, we've got Rocky Romero, CM Punk, quite a few names actually in that Power 500. Happy to see that, and I hope to see more members of our roster in that list at the end of 2007. Before that, however, I have a lot of decisions to make. Basically, our entire roster's contract's up. I hope there's no offers from elsewhere for them. As yet, I don't think anybody's coming for any of our guys, but there's a chance that even CM Punk could be going. So I didn't foresee this. This could basically, it's going to take the save one of two ways. I'm probably going to cut a few of them names. I don't see much reason in keeping Elijah Burke, for instance. Maybe Danny Doreen, Chris Cage, Roadkill. It's hard decisions to make because I do like every member of the roster in a different way. I think we've got some very good jobbers, people who basically will never complain about losing. But it's going to be a difficult decision. I'd be interested to hear what anybody watching thinks, so I'll probably leave a link to a poll or survey in the description for anybody who wants to give me some feedback. But as you can see, another profit. We've had a very, very successful year in terms of the finances of the company, and as we look to move to rebuild and reshape the roster, it's definitely good to have a lot of money in the bank. We started with 1 million, we're now at 5 million. It's been a very successful year for ECW any which way that you look at it, and we go to FX at war with TNA. That's the key thing now. I think that war is going to come more into it, especially with us going head to head with them on TV. This is ECW under the WWE umbrella, so we are basically Vince's little attack dog. We're going to try and stop TNA from getting as big as they did, and in doing that, look to bring in some fresh faces, some big names, and create new stars as we look to build ECW to the next level.